friends? My name is Jess. Welcome back to my channel. It is once again that time of the year to do the mid-year book freakout tag. If you're not new to BookTube, I'm sure you've been expecting these videos. If you are new to BookTube, this is basically just a tag for like the best, the worst, just the standout books from the past 6 or 7 months. And I'm kind of having like an internal crisis about the fact that it's already July and it's already time for the mid-year book freakout tag. So let's just get into the questions before I start thinking about how fast time moves. All right, the first question is the best book that I've read so far in 2022, and that is 100% Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a contemporary book that talks about abuse in the music industry. Our main character is a 17-year-old singer who gets scouted by a much more famous, much more powerful, and much older man who I think is about 10 years older than her. And just based on the fact that I mentioned abuse in the music industry, I'm sure you can guess where the story goes from there. Of all of the books that I have read this year, I think Grown was the most masterfully done. The Poppy War comes a close second, but Grown got a visceral reaction out of me that is just rare. And I'll talk about it more when I get to one of the later questions, but it was just, I still think about the way that I reacted to that story. I still remember the way I felt when I was reading it. I talk about the book more in depth in my all my 5-star reads so far video that I put up, I don't know, around March, April, something like that. The next question is best sequel that I've read so far this year, and I haven't read a lot of sequels actually, so I think what I'm gonna end up picking is Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. This is the second book in the Arc of a Scythe trilogy. The main premise of this story is that it takes place in a very distant future world in which a lot of human struggles have been eradicated, including natural death. And so because humans are not naturally dying off, or they can be revived from accidents and things like that, certain people become scythes who choose who's going to die and then kill them off in whatever manner they choose to do so. This whole series was so fun to me, and I understand why people have criticisms about it. I get where they're coming from, but I don't know. It was so fun. I read through them so quickly, and Thunderhead is my favorite book of the entire series. The world was just expanded so much more. There was more discussion about, humanity and morality and what that entails, especially in a world where physical pain, emotional pain, and death just don't exist anymore. And the ending to this book specifically was just, it was exciting. That's it. That's what I have to describe it as. It was fun. Third question is new release you haven't read yet but want to, which for me is Violeta by Isabel Allende. I actually just started reading this like on the day that I'm filming this, or actually the day before. This book follows the life of a Latin American woman named Violeta who lives for 100 years. From 1920 to 2020, she witnesses a bunch of historical events, including the Spanish flu, a Great Depression, and the fight for women's rights. Allende is one of my grandma's favorite authors, so I have a certain fondness for her because of that. Violeta is actually going to be the 4th Isabel Allende book that I've read. And I've loved all the other ones so far. It's not my usual type of book, but I appreciate it, and I really appreciate, the magical realism elements of her story. I think it's entertaining. I think her stories tell a lot about people. Next question is most anticipated releases for the second half of the year, and I haven't really been keeping track of this, I'll be honest, but there are 2 releases that I think are happening in the next part of the year. One of them being Babel by R.F. Kuang, which is a dark academia book. I've heard it has footnotes, which I am a sucker for every single time. And then the other one is the second X-Hex book, which I think is called The Kiss Curse by Aaron Sterling. I'll be talking about the X-Hex for another question, but I loved the book, and I'm very happy to be reading a companion book that follows another character in the same world. Next is the biggest disappointment of the year, and I'm sorry to say that was The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. I have been waiting for a book with Quan as the main love interest ever since I read The Bride Test and The Kiss Quotient. He was my favorite side character. It just really felt like he was going to be an amazing love interest. I thought his romance was going to be epic. And my biggest disappointment, I think, comes from the fact that his character felt so different in The Heart Principle. It just didn't feel like the same guy at all. It also felt like, compared to the other 2 books, this one was more serious, it was more emotional, and it was less focused on the romance. While a good book, it wasn't what I was waiting for. On the opposite side of the spectrum, the next question is the biggest surprise, which for me was The Book of Embraces by Eduardo Galeano, which I have a physical copy of, so where? The Book of Embraces. Here it is. So when I picked this up, I was under the impression that it was like a non-fiction collection of short stories that Galeano put together during his travels through different Latin American countries and through Spain, I think he was in for a while, which this book kind of is, but it's so much more than that. I honestly want to do a whole separate review video for this book because I think it deserves a lot more attention than being lumped into a video with a bunch of other books, but I also want to reread it and take more dedicated notes in order to do a separate review video. I loved it so much more than I thought I would. Even when I started it, I got maybe 60 pages into it and it was taking me so long to read it because it just wasn't what I was used to. It's basically a collection of short stories written in the magical realism style, so you can't really pick apart what's fact versus what's exaggerated, and that was a difficult thing for me to get used to. I think this is the most magical realism of all magical realism books that I've read. But once I got used to it and I got really into the style and I really started to appreciate it for what it was just amazing. It gave me a new appreciation for magical realism. I think one of the points of this book is actually that the exaggerations are just as real and true as the facts. And it talks about a lot of different things. It talks about love, it talks about grief, it talks about illness, I'm pretty sure. I can't really remember everything at this point, but it was great. Next is favorite new author, which means either a debut author or just an author that's new to me. And for that, I have picked either Tiffany D. Jackson or R.F. Kuang. Grown and The Poppy War are the most well-done books I've read this year. I think both books did and elicited exactly what the authors hoped for, and I mean, what more can you ask for? I'm more than happy to read anything that either of these two authors write. All right, next question is newest fictional crush. I don't really have fictional crushes. I haven't read anyone swoon-worthy this year, I don't think. So if I absolutely have to pick one, I think I'm gonna pick one of the boys from These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, Marshall specifically. If I had to pick any of the characters, I think I would go with Marshall. He's got a very charming personality, you know? He's funny, he's very loyal, and I think of all the characters, he's like the sweetest one. The next question is newest favorite character in general, and I don't really have one. Like, there's no character that I have formed an emotional attachment to that I just love, will die for. But again, if I have to pick one, I'm gonna pick Rowan from the Arc of the Scythe trilogy. I just really liked his character development. It was a lot about how your circumstances can change who you are and how you react to things, but the very core of you and of your morals and your ideals can stay the same and just remain unshakable. I think he would be considered a morally gray character, and I just appreciate characters who don't try to remain on their high horse and are actually willing to get their hands dirty in order to achieve their own goals. Rin from Poppy War kind of reminds me of the same thing, but I'll be honest, Rowan to me is just more likable. And although his methods maybe weren't moral, I think his goals were always well-intentioned, and I think like you're always meant to support him and support his goals, whereas Rin, because her book is more realistic, she does make choices that I think the reader would be like, I don't agree with that, I don't support that. So I think it's easier to just like Rowan and then feel more conflicted about Rin, which is why I chose Rowan. Next, book that made me cry. So I did not physically shed a tear for anything. I'm not a very easy crier when it comes to books. But of all the ones that I've read, Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson is the one that got me the closest to crying. Because it was so masterfully written, Grown's depiction of abuse felt like a slap in the face. It felt very realistic. This book talks about many different forms of abuse, including physical, mental, and sexual, and it all felt like claws sinking into your skin until you are just as trapped as the characters. I remember feeling like I was in physical pain. I remember feeling sick to my stomach, desperately wanting to help the main character and then not being able to do anything. It was just very difficult to get through. And then on the flip side, what is the book that made you the happiest? And that is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. This is a romance book where all our main characters are witches. About 7 years before the events of our story, our main character has just broken up with her boyfriend, and in a moment of theatrics and heartbreak, she decides to lay a curse on him with some random candle that she has in her bedroom. At most, this curse should have just been a bad hair day, but 7 years later, when he returns to town, she finds out that the curse that she put on him was much more powerful and much more deadly than she intended. And it's also affecting the rest of the town. So she and her ex need to get together in order to fight the curse and save the town. This book was just so much fun. It had Hocus Pocus vibes, it had small town vibes, it was witchy. I liked the romantic relationship and I liked the family relationships too. There were funny moments, there were sexy moments, although not what I would call steamy. And there was just fun adventure at the center of it that involved ghosts and possessed toys and things like that. It was a fun time. All right, next question. Favorite book adaptation that I've seen this year? I'm gonna go with Bridgerton. I have not read the books. and I never planned to read the books, but it is a book adaptation show, and I love it. It's so engrossing. The show makes my heart flutter. I am in love with Eloise and Theo, and I don't care what the source material has to say about that. Next question is, favorite video you've done this year? I don't really have a favorite video because I don't think I've done any videos this year that are stand out or special or anything. It's pretty standard booktube content, which is something that I want to work on, but that's neither here nor there. I think of all my videos, I would pick the May and June TBR video though. I just remember having a lot of fun filming it. I was in a really good mood when I filmed it. Plus it added a different structure to my reading, and it turns out that I really liked the structure that it added, so it was a fun experiment that turned out well. All right, next question is the most beautiful book you have bought or been given this year. And I literally just got this book. It is El Amor en los Tiempos del Cólera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I just got this last week. My boyfriend's mother sent this to me as a gift for my birthday. It is gorgeous. You've got the cover, the spine, the back. We've got some end papers there. And the whole book has illustrations throughout it. So you have this, and it has like cutouts in each of the pictures, which I'm really not sure why, but maybe I'll find out why, or it's just a style thing. But it has illustrations throughout the whole thing. It's so beautiful. It's got a little ribbon bookmark too. All right, and the last question, what books do you need to finish by the end of the year? So many. Everything that's left on my top 22 books to read in 2022 list. I think there are 14 books left on that list, which is a bit. And so it's a bit, but I mean, I can still manage it. I also need to read the Percy Jackson series finally. I would like to finish the Poppy War trilogy because I've read the first book. I'm a little bit into the second book, and I would just like to finish out the whole trilogy this year. And I would also like to finally read the Bloodline series by Rochelle Mead, which I will admit, considering I still get interest on my Battle of the Vampires video, I think a vlog for Bloodlines is really what the people want. So that is in the cards for this year. And if you want to hear more about my reading plans, my July/August TBR video either already came out the week before this one or will come out the week after this video, so look out for that one. And that is it for this tag. Please comment below your answers to any of these questions. I'll admit, I'm especially interested to know what your answers would be for like the biggest disappointment of the year for you. Call me a negative Nelly, but I just love to hear the gossip. I will see you in the next one.